Welcome to TLA History, the channel for all things Year 9 history. Hello and welcome back to Week 3, the First World War. We are continuing our key question of this week. What was everyday life like for soldiers of World War I? Last lesson, we explored the daily life in the trenches, and this lesson is more focused on different historical interpretations of the Battle of the Somme, which was one of the most significant fights in World War I. Our learning objective today is to compare historical interpretations of the Battle of the Somme. Firstly, as a starter activity, I want us to consider what is meant by historical interpretations. So, pause here and take a couple of minutes to do this. Two football fans, one of them being Leeds United and the other one being Manchester United, go to watch a game between the two clubs. Leeds United win 2-1 with the winning goal in the final minute. After the game, both fans are asked to write a report of the match. Will these reports be the same? And in what ways will they be different and why? So pause the video here and answer these questions below. Why will these reports be the same and why will they be different? We're all different and we all have our own beliefs and past experiences. We therefore might see things from different perspectives and have a different interpretation of the same event. We may also bring our biased opinions into this interpretation. It's important for us as historians to consider that different historical interpretations might be biased too. Bias can therefore impact certain sources, and we saw this last week with propaganda. In the same way that two football fans can view the same match in very different ways due to bias, different people can view different events in history very differently too. In today's lesson, we will study the Battle of the Somme and compare the views of the officers who ordered it to the soldiers who took part of it. This difference in opinion is referred to in history as historical interpretations. There are often different interpretations of any historical event, and possibly in day-to-day life too. So first, I'm going to go over some key dates and explain why this battle was so significant. It began the 1st of July 1916 and it didn't end until the 18th of November the same year, so it lasted over 4 months. It took place in the upper reaches of the River Somme in France, between the allies of Britain and France against Germany. It was so significant because it killed so many people in the first day. 60,000 people were killed, and altogether over 1 million people died. And 1,738,000 artillery shells or bullets were fired before the advance even began. Here are some primary source photographs to give you a better idea of how it looked. You can see the top left, it took 3 people to operate a machine gun. It also shows the trenches and the destruction between the heavily artillery and the barbed wire. Can you imagine how claustrophobic it would have been in those trenches during an assault of the Battle of the Somme? Douglas Haig was a significant figure during the First World War, as he was a leading commanding officer, which meant he would plan the battles. He planned the Battle of the Somme, and is considered to be the most controversial figure of history due to people's opposing views about him. He commanded most battles on the Western Front, which meant the main area where the battles took place between France and Belgium. He was nicknamed the Butcher of the Somme because of the sheer amount of lives lost, whilst others argued that the battle was costly yet epic and enabled the Allies to win the war. Here we see an image and it shows us the soldiers of the Battle of the Somme have been described as lions led by donkeys. What do you think this means? Think about the connotation that you get from each animal. What does a lion mean? And what does donkey mean? Jot down a few notes. If I was to describe you as a lion, what characteristics would you have? Whereas if I was to describe you as a donkey, what characteristics do you think you'd have? Here is our first mini task of the day. Have a go at this close exercise. Fill in the blanks and pause the video for 5 minutes to do this. The answers will be coming up on the next slide, but have a go first. Think carefully about which words make the most sense and use your historical knowledge to cancel out the ones that you do know. So pause here, 5 minutes, have a go. I expect this to be written down and seen when I can mark this on class charts. Here are the answers. General Haig had a brilliant plan for the Battle of the Somme. He used heavy artillery, big guns, to bombard the German lines with shells for 8 days before the attack. He thought this would destroy their trenches and leave them devastated. The British army could simply then march towards them over no man's land and finish off what was left of them. He even ordered them to walk, not run. He was that confident. However, most shells hadn't carried far enough and had fallen short of the German trenches, and the Germans had worked out what was happening and moved back out of the way when the British British walked towards them, they were ready with machine guns to mow them down. Artillery is another word for guns used in warfare, and no man's land is the space between trenches. And shells are another word for huge bullets used during World War I. These were usually fired out of tanks. So I'm going to start introducing your task, and it's going to take about 30 minutes for you to do today. So you have to read through your source sheet to find out the different historical interpretations of the Battle of the Somme. These will be linked to you on class charts, but also on the next slide. So make sure you pause it if you don't have access to class charts, and that will be your source. Here is your source. So you have several sources that you need to read and interpret for your next task. So stay tuned because I'm going to introduce your 30-minute task for today. Here is your main task of today. Once you've read through those sources, answer these questions. As always, you can choose your task after reading the sources, but make sure that you challenge yourself, okay? If don't get too comfortable on green, make sure you also attempt amber or maybe even red. Our key question this week was, what was everyday life like for soldiers of World War I? Both lessons have explored daily life, both in and out of battle for the soldiers. Now I'd like you to quickly, as a summary, write a short point evidence explanation paragraph explaining what life was like for everyday soldiers. Make sure you refer to the trenches and the Battle of the Somme in your answer. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more history content at TLA. This has been your lesson, and goodbye.